Hello, colleagues and friends. Welcome to the 7th monthly installment of the Local Government and Municipal Authorities Group webinar series, Multi-Level Action Delivers. My name is Cale Roberts. I'm a Senior Program Officer with ICLAE, joining you from New York in the United States and serving as your moderator for today's LGMA webinar. We're joined by the LGMA focal point, Eunice Arakan, who is our ICLAE Global Director of Advocacy and lead in the LGMA's discussions around the UNFCCC. To bring synergies between the climate and nature agendas, we're happy to welcome Ingrid Kutsia, Director of Biodiversity, Nature and Health with the Cities Biodiversity Center, and Stefania Romano, Global Coordinator for the Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature platforms. If you are new to these calls, welcome. We are the Local Government and Municipal Authorities constituency and have been following the international climate agenda since the first COP, all the way back to 1995, as well as many more milestone moments since then. A few of them are listed here on this timeline. From 2013, we've also represented the Global Task Force, which is a platform for influencing all UN processes through our advocacy. Today, we're more than 30 UNFCCC accredited networks representing cities and regions, ensuring that the priorities of local governments are heard across a busy advocacy calendar. We have a website. You can follow along on this journey. It's at cities-and-regions.org. You're going to find a negotiations tracker, stories from our partners, and much more on here. So please bookmark that in your web browser. Today's event, along with all of the webinars in this series, are supplied to you on the YouTube channel. You're listening to part 7 here. We're in July. This is a monthly series, and a reminder that we have adjusted the timing for this webinar to be about 90 minutes in order to give a fuller diversity of voices and to track updates on biodiversity alongside climate. Today may be more in the 60-minute time frame, but save the full time in future events. Great, so let's just kind of center ourselves for today's conversation by looking back a bit at key milestones from the past, 7 months or so. So that we saw on the way to Glasgow, 60 countries brought more ambitious climate targets, with many pointing to collaboration with local and regional governments as one reason that, that their nation was able to raise its ambition. After all, more than 1,000 cities have pledged climate neutrality, and are setting interim targets. Many of the groups you all joining in today were key to ensuring that level of success heading into COP26. Throughout the 2 weeks of COP26, the multi-level action pavilion served as the home base of subnational governments in the Blue Zone. We hosted more than 70 sessions led by a broad diversity of more than 30 partners. The interaction and solidarity among LGMA constituency at the multi-level action pavilion paved the way to key COP26 outcomes. Several of them listed here on the screen, including the recognition of the need for multi-level and cooperative action becoming installed in the preamble of the Glasgow Climate Pact, ultimately providing that time for multi-level action has come. Building on the COP26 achievements, multi-level action delivers is our new guiding motto. It's defining our work as the LGMA in our roadmap toward COP27, really bringing that idea of implementation. It's time to act forward. Eunice will speak more to this near the end of the call today. We work as a constituency around these kind of 4 pillars for what we do. Active in the negotiation space, making sure that the voice of mayors, of council members, of governors, all subnational elected leaders are finding their seat at the table as much as possible. As Ingrid will point to, there are some major breakthroughs that have happened, especially in the biodiversity space. And we work every day to make sure that these same kind of breakthroughs are happening in the climate space as well. An active action agenda, working across the Marrakesh Partnership with our collaborators in other engagement groups to work with our nations to raise ambition. This also will happen in side-by-side partnership with the COP presidencies. Recognizing that each COP is hosted by a nation that really can set an agenda with varying levels of ambition and varying interaction with the local government constituency. So it's our job as the LGMA to elevate our role in the eyes of the COP presidencies and serve as a partner to them. And then finally, a 4th kind of pillar of our work is within this Friends of Multi-Level Action. And Eunice can speak a bit more to this in his portion. Great, I touched on this already, that each COP will have a presidency, and there's this kind of handoff process that happens. And so the UK government's presidency, I'm handing off to the new COP presidency for COP27 under the auspices of the Egyptian government. You can see here a few of the names on the screen. The high-level champion, Dr. Mahmoud Mohidin, designated as the champion for Egypt. And then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Shukri, the president designate for Egypt. So the LGMA constituency group is ensuring that there's continuity in the work that that the LGMA does between these presidencies, really helping them find synergies and to amplify the work of cities. Some very important developments there on Sustainable Cities Initiative, the first ever climate and urbanization ministerial, some of these kind of key moments that we're leading to in COP27 that Eunice can share the updates whenever we get to his portion. So with that, I will be turning it over to some updates on biodiversity. I do just want to throw up the logos here on the screen to say a thank you for many of you who are joined on the line and are part of this movement, part of this a calendar that is becoming more and more a calendar of success stories. And we're happy to have you with us on this journey. So thank you to Ingrid Kutsia and Stefania Romano from the ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center for joining us and sharing your updates on the biodiversity agenda. Over to you first, Ingrid.
Thank you. And let me just quickly share my screen with everybody. Get that up. I hope you can all see it. There you are. I'm going to try and be quick. We're gearing towards the 15th Conference of Parties of the CBD. I think in the last webinar, it was reported that it had been relocated to Montreal as the headquarters of the CBD Secretariat, but that the COP will be held still under the presidency of China. So China is obviously still in charge of the COP itself, the high-level segment, etc. And the new dates are now going to be not in September anymore, but it is in December. And we're looking at the period, the first half of December, from the 15th to the 17th. It's a really strategic COP for us. It's the sort of Paris moment, if we want to call it that way. It's a COP that should have taken place 2 years ago already, in the sense that it's going to be the COP where we will adopt the new framework for the next decade and the new targets towards 2030. And another thing that is important about this COP is that you know, it's going to be the COP also where cities and subnational governments will adopt and will have a new plan of action for this new decade, specifically around their contribution to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and its targets. I think the other thing that's interesting to know about the Biodiversity COP is that it's held slightly differently to the climate COPs, in that the major groups, and there are 6 for the purposes of the CBD, one of them being local and subnational governments, major groups as well as observers are allowed to make interventions. It's obviously always at the, if there's time, and at the discretion of the chairs. But when we do make interventions as a major group for text amendments, for example, in the negotiating meetings, it has to be, in order to be taken on board, it has to be supported by at least one or more CBD parties. Otherwise, obviously, it doesn't get taken on board. We've just come from the meetings in Nairobi. When we had the last webinar, the LGMA webinar, I was in Nairobi, and we were very actively engaged in those negotiation processes. And while the negotiation was really hard, it was very difficult to get consensus amongst the parties. There are still areas of divergence in terms of many aspects. There has been a lot of growth or progress made in the sense that the divergent areas are clear. There is a consensus around some things, but there's still a lot of text that's in brackets. So as a result of that, the parties will be having another intersessional meeting directly before the next COP, because the text needs to advance further. There needs to be greater consensus, and they need to prepare a final text for the COP to consider and to adopt. But it has been really good news, and it was a very successful intersessional negotiating meeting for our major group, in the sense that we managed to get a lot more text around subnational governments at all levels of subnational governments, and the role that they will be playing insofar as implementing the new Global Biodiversity Framework. And there's a lot of emphasis around implementation, for example, in the purpose of the Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as in the theory of change, which is important because that sets the frame, as well as the principles, and then, of course, also in the sections that deal with enabling conditions. As far as the targets are concerned, probably one of the few targets that came out with the least amount of brackets was the one that relates to access to and the quality of green and blue open spaces in cities. And I think the other thing that was a major breakthrough and a big successful achievement for us was that we were seeing for the first time a lot of new parties, or not new parties, but new support from parties. For example, countries like Nepal, Iran, the Philippines, that had previously not expressed any views or opinions and their positions on the role of subnational governments, they were now for the first time coming out in terms of very strong support. So that was a great achievement. We were also invited to make joint statements on behalf of our major groups. So that was ICLEI together with the representatives from Regions 4 and the advisory committees. We made interventions, joint statements in both the opening and the closing plenaries, and both of these statements were supported by parties, as well as the text amendment interventions that we made. And I think probably the highlight for us was we received a lot of commendments and support from many parties for the very strategic and focused approach that we're taking. And I'm certainly looking forward to a successful COP in December. And then the last thing I just want to say is that there's still a lot of uncertainty as to exactly the modalities. That is for the government of China as the presidency to come out with. So we are awaiting further notifications from the Secretariat. There will be a summit on cities and subnational governments. It's going to be the 7th one. And we've started talking with the government of Quebec as well as the city of Montreal. We also hopefully will be able to have some form of link. It will obviously be a virtual link to the city of Kunming during the course of the summit. We're looking at that middle weekend between sort of the 10th and 11th of December. We're looking at a 2-day event. At the high-level summit will take, at the high-level segment of the COP is going to be in the 3rd week, the 2nd week, and we would like to position our summit directly before the high-level segment so that we can make, we've got an outcome coming from the summit before the high-level segment where the ministers will make their statements and their interventions. And then just to say, the last thing is that I think that given the strategic importance of the summit, we're obviously wanting to have a very strong delegation from cities. So we're going to be contacting mayors as well as obviously governors. We had a very good meeting this morning with Lagos State. We've had several meetings, for example, with Sao Paulo State. I know that there are many subnational governments that are interested in attending, as well as many cities. And we will also be having, in preparation to this, we will be having meetings of the 2 advisory committees to the CBD. That's the one on cities and the other one on subnational governments. And I will finish with that. Thank you so much, Kale.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ingrid, for your remarks. To add on with some of this with the biodiversity agenda, we can turn now to Stefania Romano for an update on the UN Oceans Conference. Stefania, would you like me to share your slide?
Yes, Kale, thank you so much. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, indeed, there has been a very interesting and enriching conference in Portugal at the end of June. The United Nations Ocean Conference has been convened by the United Nations General Assembly, hosted by the governments of Kenya and Portugal, and specifically the focus has been on the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is conserve and sustainable use of the ocean, seas, marine resources for sustainable development. Indeed, we are more than aware that coastal cities are very important hubs for innovation and for economic productivity. They concentrate assets and people, but they are also quite in a dangerous place. And that's why solutions are needed in terms of policy, in terms of technological and technical inputs. And that's what has been discussed all over that very week. It has taken place from the 27th of June until the 1st of July. It was myself present there, and Kate Strachan. She's the manager of climate change resilience. There have been a number of very interesting side events that we have been taking place, like for example, the one where Elizabeth Memra was just co-chairing, specifically talking about the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We really very much thank her for her hard work and commitment and devotion, not only for the process itself, but also for the support given to cities with nature. We have also been invited to be intervening at the end of the very week at the Interactive Dialogue 8, leveraging interlinkages between Sustainable Development Goals 14 and the other Sustainable Development Goals. There were very interesting stakeholders that have been taking the floor on that very plenary. And also we have been liaising and strengthening our relations with municipalities themselves, like the one of Lisbon. Hopefully they will join soon Cities with Nature. If you can go to the next slide, I will also show you that prior to the very week, we also had a specific session in Matosinhos near Porto, the Saturday, 25th of June, which was specifically co-organized by ICLEI, and was just focusing on the action, on localizing action for the ocean. So the role of local and regional governments. We have been moderating. Kate Strachan, she has been moderating the first session, and we have been co-organized the second session. Now, I would say that overall, besides the key recommendations that came out from this very session, for example, how to be strengthening the role of local and regional governments in implementing the Sustainable Development Goal 14, but also how to be strengthening the capacities of local and regional governments. So what technical solution might be happening and being developing. Overall, I would say that it's been a very, very, very interesting conference itself, and it's really been highlighted all throughout that we have to be moving from the ocean knowledge to action, that yes, technical suggestions are important, but we have to be implementing human rights-based approach. And that's been very interesting to be seeing and just discussing together NGOs, business and science, and how to be on channeling the funds and financing mechanisms for local governments who are implementing actions. The how stays a little bit still unfocused. It still has to be identified, but it's been there on the agenda. So we have been participating with a lot of, I would say, enthusiasm, and also brought back very good results. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefania, for the update from the Oceans Conference. At this stage, I think we can move through to Eunice's updates on the climate agenda, and then at that point, we'll open the floor to questions. So for those on the line, if you are having some questions about the nature agenda, please hold them, but don't forget them. We will come back after Eunice's remarks. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Eunice.
Thank you, Kale. Greetings to all colleagues. I'm delighted to join this session. Unfortunately, it's a bit difficult situation logistically because I am practically on the move somewhere around the Balkans, on the way to Turkey for my family vacation. But I really wanted to join this discussion with us because a number of processes are advancing rapidly, and I just wanted to give you some updates, and I will be happy to hear from you as well, from those participants in the call. We usually, if you can remember, also track back to what has happened over the past weeks since the last webinar, and in that sense, of course, the biggest thing was the World Urban Forum, and immediately followed by the COP of Cities, which was hosted by AMF in Abidjan. But in this call, we will particularly focus on three topics: the Cairo workshop that's coming up next week, which is related to the Sustainable Cities Initiative with COP27 presidency. and in connection what is going on in this solutions day at COP27. I also would like to suggest we spend some time on the multi-level action pavilion, and then finally the global stock take. We would just compile some information on these after this call, so that once you receive the the presentation of this webinar, you can have more information. But now I prefer to go them verbally because of the challenges I have on the call. So coming to the Cairo workshop, those who were in the call last week, you may recall this was a process kicked off during the Bonn conference in June. The presidency, Ambassador Ayman from the presidency team has approached ICLE and UN Habitat to lead or help the presidency to draft a sustainable cities initiative. In that sense, we have suggested that a first round of discussions could be held during World Urban Forum, which proved to be very successful. We have around 50 participants from UN system, from local and regional governments, even stakeholders outside LGMA, traditional LGMA, in particular the urban community who do not necessarily follow the climate negotiations. That was the first input to the debate by the presidency, and this will now confirm that it will be followed up by a workshop in Cairo on 27th of July next week. This workshop is one day. It will be in person, but there will be virtual connections. We're very happy that we have received a very good response from the parties from the north and south, especially European countries. Japan has shown a very keen interest from the north, especially Germany, Netherlands, France, and the UK. From the global south, we have Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Gabon, who will host the Latin America Regional Climate Week as well. And we have a good diversity of network of LGMA partners. Ahead of this meeting, UN Habitat, who is leading the drafting of the Sustainable Cities Initiative, will share an initial discussion paper, which we will circulate to the LGMA as well. The discussions will be followed virtually as well for those who cannot travel to Cairo on that day. And I think this is also in line with the discussions we are having with the presidency. They really want a strong support from parties, but they also want to really show that this is really the beginning of a new era. That's the second phase of the Paris Agreement. If you read the description of the 17th of November Solutions Day, you can easily notice that they are both aiming to address a holistic approach to urbanization, which is again in line with the LGMA priorities, but also they want to be concrete in terms of sectoral approaches like buildings, resilience, and even transport. We have, as LGMA, introduced the presidency to our colleagues in the SLOCAT, the co-lead on the transport sector in the Marrakesh Partnership. I think that is becoming clear that Solutions Day, in practical terms, which is 17th of November, the last day before the closure of the COP, will become really the day for urban solutions, be it holistically or sectorally. So I think that is making us very excited, because this is exactly what we want to bring to the table, that if we are going toward climate emergency, we have to deliver the Glasgow Pact, which is the multi-level action, is now in practice. We're very happy with Cairo workshop preparations, but also the vision of the presidency for the 17th of November, which is, again, it will be good to emphasize that it aims to provide a holistic approach to sustainable urbanization and climate-friendly urbanization, obviously, but also sectoral approaches. We have good news. Nigel Topping, the high-level climate champion, will join us on that day. We will also have the UN FCC director for intergovernmental support and cooperation. And we are expecting that the workshop will end up with a brief vision, but the workshop will not be the last point of our discussions. This will be continuing, especially during the African Climate Week in Gabon at the end of August. And the presidency aims to have a soft launch early October, before the COP. That is consistent with other initiatives that they're running up. The logic is that COP is not the place for people to learn about what will happen in this initiative, but it is rather that it is announced outside, and it is announced owned by parties and the LGMA, of course, and the UN Habitat, but also it will then be rolled out with the governance and financing mechanism if possible. We are all aware every president has this kind of vision, and some of them can fly out, some of them can have a very short-lived faith, but we feel, considering the parallel processes on cities, be it in the G7, Commonwealth, we are seeing that there is now a surge of interest to local and governments in line with what we have achieved at the Glasgow Climate Pact, which is the multi-level action has come. So therefore, we are significantly ambitious for a very powerful outcome. Therefore, 17th of November, it may be sound as if the last day of the COP, but it is very likely it will be a moment where we will already have a paragraph on sustainable cities or regions or multi-level action inside the Sharm el-Sheikh outcome document already in advance. You may remember in Glasgow, we had a challenge that there were no reference when the president's text was released, and it was LGMA who managed to bring all this text into the process. We assume with our discussion with the Egyptian presidency, we will already have a draft text available that will be circulated by the beginning of the second week. Therefore, our day on the 17th of November will not be full of question marks, but rather it's really then saying that we have a solid basis in the negotiations, and now it's time to deliver and go forward. In this context, we are expecting UN Habitat will also, together with the COP presidency, will also make some announcements soon about preparations for climate and urbanization ministerial. This is, let's say, layman's description, but it is it's a ministerial conference between climate ministers, ministers of housing, ministers of urbanization, obviously LGMA leadership, as well as mayors and governors across the world. Why we are very excited in this, because during World Urban Forum, it was already discussed very heavily in the Dialogue 6 at the session with the Ministry of Assistant Minister of Housing from Egypt, Sharon Dijksma, who is nominated as ICLE's COP27 special envoy for ministerials, and other partners. So it is highly likely that by the Cairo workshop next week, we may have official announcements about the format or the vision of this climate and urbanization ministerial. This gives us a good time to prepare from now until COP27. And now this brings us to the second point. The COP27 is advancing. You may have noticed there was applications for side events. This has been now in the process of UNFCCC. They are now merging, all the applicants are merging their UNFCCC side events applications. But of course, we are focusing now on the blue zone, the negotiations area, where we have pavilions that is similar to the one we had in Glasgow. That multi-level action pavilion was our blue zone home for subnationals, and we will replicate this. We will discuss this last webinar. We have circulated additional information. We have, as of today, ICLE has applied by the deadline of 15th of July. We would like to foresee that this is at least similar to Glasgow, but we are envisaging it will be even bigger than Glasgow in terms of size, the space. We would make sure, in addition to those theater settings, we will have a spatial corner for Africa, so that African cities and regions can also be prominently visible. We will have additional bilateral workshop rooms, networking areas. So we would like to replicate the example or the success of COP26 in that regard. It will be a multi-level action pavilion branded as again like that. We're very happy Scottish government has confirmed their financial support, which is contributing a significant portion of it, but we still would need additional funding. The full amount of resources that we would need is not clear yet, because the company who is hosting the pavilion area has not communicated us the full cost of the design and build, but we're expecting it to be almost in the similar scale of COP26, which was around 500,000 in total in terms of all the expenses. Therefore, we are looking for co-hosts who could mobilize funding around 50,000 or so, and program partners who could contribute around 10,000 or so for the costs. We will especially reach out to the previous partners of the COP26 pavilion, but we will also open the door for other partners as well. And finally, while this is going on, the global stocktake is taking a real attention. If you can remember, in Bonn, we as LGMA made it possible that global stocktake is now will be able to take place in cities and regions across the world and nations. So we are now discussing that we could kick off a couple of months of mobilization of LGMA, which can focus on a stocktake for climate emergency. That is exactly what we would like to see. Just like Talanoa dialogues paved the way for Glasgow Pact, this global stocktake could be used as a stepping stone for climate emergency. And if we can have, so let's remember, stocktake will finish in COP28 in Dubai. If we can have a very successful Sharm el-Sheikh with an initiative, with a pavilion and a climate and urbanization ministerial, the global stocktake can be much more enriched by the local stocktakes. Where our proposal would be to use the Daring Cities 2022 as the moment to kick off this vision. And we will complete with this process next year at the Daring Cities again, this time in June, so that we can convene a multi-level stocktake as well. These are the process going on. As I said, in the last webinar slides, you can find some details, but we will share them again. That would be my input for the moment. And maybe if it is okay at the moment, Kale, I can give a break because we may still give some time for our partners to provide any questions or remarks, but I can come back if needed for any clarifications as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Yunus. So I do see that we'll have potentially a question or two that are coming in. Before we get to questions proper, maybe we will open the floor to partners on the line who have some contributions to make about either the biodiversity or climate agenda. Apart from questions, anyone like to raise your hand or signal in a chat to become unmuted and share some updates? Great. I do see a couple hands raised. They could be comments or they could have been questions that you raised your hands for. Either way is fine. David Jackson, I see you first, so I will call on you to ask your question now. Go ahead, David.
Thank you so much indeed. Just wanted to say thank you very much, Yunus, for that very comprehensive presentation. Sorry, I missed you actually at WAF. We were also there working closely with you in Habitat on the city's investment facility. I've just got one question. If we can contribute to the financing of the multi-level pavilion, what's the best way to, do we email you directly? What's the best way to follow that up? And then just a couple of, and secondly, is there availability for one of our colleagues to attend remotely, probably, the workshop next week? And it might be quite interesting to present at the workshop next week some of the developments on the financing side. We've just applied to the European Union EFSD Plus for a $200 million guarantee fund for cities, which will be specifically for climate resilient infrastructure. Together with ICLEI, we're putting together, you may know through ESTA, a proposal for a debt fund for cities too. This in addition to the local work, which I think Sophie and others can also brief you on if they're around. So two questions really. One, how do we get in touch with you if we want to contribute to the multi-level action? And secondly, with regard to participation in the Cairo workshop next week. But more broadly, what a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Yunus. Looks like things are moving forwards, and this is great news. Over to you. Thank you.
Kale, I think we will pick up some other hands, I think, huh? Isn't it so?
Okay.
It may be better, we can take notes and come back.
Okay, that is fine. I did capture David's questions. So next we'll move to Agnes Brule, if you would like to unmute.
Hello, everybody. everybody. I'm Agnes. I'm from FMDV. I'm sorry, Jean-François Abo and Carlos Desfreitas cannot be here today. It was just to tell you that we cannot unfortunately be here in Cairo, but letters of invitation to Egyptian ministers and have been will be coming. Also, to inform you about the Finance Your Cities conference, which is linked to the FIX, the Finance in Common Summit, in October in Abidjan. It is under the high patronage of the Côte d'Ivoire government. It was announced during the high-level meeting in New York for the New Urban Agenda, and it will take place right after the Finance in Common Summit. So that's on October 21st. And this summit is the reunion of over 500 public development banks. And so it's a one-day forum with high-level participation as well, with ministers, and it's linked to solutions, also linked to the climate emergency. So I wanted to tell you this, that's the major information I wanted to pass. Thanks.
Agnes, thank you so much for the input. That reunion of 500 development banks sounds like a major forum. So thanks for putting it forward here. Next, we'll move to Claudia Huerta. Go ahead, Claudia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the information. It's been really, really insightful, and it's great to see so much progress. My question is a bit more focused on the ministerial side, which is, I know, Eunice, from what you were saying, we'll know more next week on the format, but I think it'd be great, if possible, when that information is ready, to understand a bit how we as organizations versus mayors and cities can engage in the ministerial directly, if there is a pathway for that. Given how much potential there is there to make progress. So that's our question. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Claudia. I think you may have entered that into the question box. If not, another similar question had come through. So I'm not seeing any other hands or questions. So maybe, Eunice, we will pick some of these up.
Yeah, thank you, Kale. Thanks to all for the contributions. Maybe for those in the call, we can also recall David is from the UN Capital Development Fund. So I'm very happy that both FMDV and UNCDF has contributed in this round of the webinar, because finance is becoming really a very key issue. You may have noticed that the daring cities will also address climate emergency finance, and we're discussing with FMDV that will also be a linkage from the daring cities to the Côte d'Ivoire event as well. Coming back to the points of David, and actually the same question is for first of all, the ministerials. We don't know too much on that yet. As I said, Assistant Minister of Housing was in Katowice. They are really open for ideas. Therefore, let's give us some time and wait for the meeting on 27th of July next week. Our vision or our assessment is that there will be at least a minimum 3 hours of a dialogue. It could be in 2 sets, and we would make sure that the voice of local and regional governments, so it's not just the ministers, but mayors and governors will be there as well. And we're confident that this will really be a multi-level dialogue. And in that sense, our dream vision, if you may call it, if we can manage a very ambitious kickoff discussion in the morning of 17th on multi-level collaboration and urbanization in terms of climate aspect. This could be 1.5 hours or so, and then this could be preceded by sectoral approaches like resilience, buildings, or transport. That may make a really nice overarching narrative, and we can also use the climate action, multi-level action pavilion and action hub, so that other spaces can also be used for that. And more importantly, what will be the outcome of the ministerial? That will be the most important thing. Let's give one example. There was ministers of finance working on climate agenda for years. This is led by World Bank, and they are producing serious results, and they are much more regular. Whereas, for example, last year we have seen ministers of transport coming together, but it didn't produce too much results as such. So we have to observe all these things, and in an ideal case, a ministerial in connection to the initiative and our multi-level action vision could kick off a kind of a new narrative across the whole UNFCCC agenda, and then have a regular agenda at the UNFCCC COPs. Of course, one of the advantages would be presidency is hosting the role of their presidency. Egypt will next year, but Egypt will also host the World Urban Forum in 2 years later. Similarly, the G7, G20 presidencies, I think this is type of the discussion we want to make sure that converges at this ministerial, and then make sure that there's an outcome in the Sharm el-Sheikh decision or declaration, so that urbanization is a regular and multi-level action, a regular agenda of the UNFCCC COPs. That for me is the most important point. And then this could be done by a series of meetings, as I said, in the Action Hub, at the plenary, multi-level action hub, and other spaces as well. But let's see, this is all on the table at the moment. On the Cairo workshop, David, we would love to welcome, of course, from you and other partners. We are assuming that by this Friday, worst case Monday, we can circulate the Zoom link. This is done by the local partners in Egypt, the UN agencies, UN Habitat, and others. And we would be very happy that this discussion is enriched by virtual participation. And in that sense, I hope you will be able to connect David and other colleagues. Coming to the pavilion question, I think the easiest would be to keep us informed, and we will keep you informed as well. We would love to have a finance work stream into the agenda of the multi-level action pavilion, taking into account what is all going on in the UNFCCC space. David, what you're doing as UN Capital Development Fund, hopefully some progress on Article 6.8 and others. And thinking of finance will be a core theme this year. In the pavilion, we should also have a very strong finance agenda. So, and this invitation goes to all of you. We will circulate once again an additional information about the pavilion, but any original or let's say initial indication about your capacity or resources. Unfortunately, for the moment, it will mainly go to me, to my mailbox, but my colleague Joe Vlatkovsky, who is managing our agenda, for those who are in Glasgow, they know him. He was the mastermind of our agenda management. So he will take over soon. But at this stage, feel free to send your, let's say, feedbacks, ideas, resources, constraints, priorities to me, so that then we can add up all these and then advance as appropriate. Time is advancing, but I think we're in a good shape in terms of coming up with a very ambitious pavilion agenda, a very strong initiative with multiple work streams, and a very powerful urbanization ministerial, which collectively can be considered as literally the process that takes the climate agenda to the emergency mode and then connect to the stock take and all the others. So I think that is where we are now advancing all together. So in that sense, probably this summer we will digest all these things, and probably at the next webinar in August, we will have more updates. And I heard, by the way, we will also hear from our colleagues from C40 on the migration agenda in the next webinar. By the way, we also are very happy that our colleagues from Regions 4 submitted our position on the agenda item on adaptation to the UNFCCC submission is done. So, I mean, this for today, we didn't go all to the submissions yet, but it's also a work in progress going forward. Maybe, Kale, I give a break here if there are no more questions.
Sure, Yunus. We did have a question come in from Wilson asking about when we might know the agenda as it takes shape. Is that the website people will find that posted to?
Yes, our website will be updated soon with updates from the Bonn conference and all the initiatives. So bear with us. We are working on the updating of the website. I now see also the chat Q&A box, full attendees list of Cairo workshop. Claudia, we'll aim to share this by Friday. At the moment, we have around 60 as of today, around 30 of them are planning to be in person, and 30 of them are positioned to be attending virtually to the discussions, and particularly the parties, that they are not able to travel easily in a short notice. Some of them are sending their embassy representative in Cairo. That's the advantage of keeping an event in the capital of the presidency. Some of them are participating in person. Majority of them are virtual. And the revised agenda, including how we will have Nigel Topping and UNFCCC and others, and we're also expecting a ministerial, let's say, the assistant level also in the participation in the workshop. So this will be circulated by Friday, together with the list.
Great, thank you, Yunus. Thank you, Shelley. Clarify that the COP27 Sustainable Cities Initiative is different from the World Bank Sustainable Cities Initiative. Thank you for that clarification, Shelley.
Shelley, that would be good. As far as I know, they are different, but if you can share with us what is the content of the Sustainable Cities Initiative, that may be also helping us. By the way, Shelley, I think you're from Bristol, if I'm not mistaken. Just to be on the safe side, feel free to introduce yourself as well. Yeah, if you share your information about the World Bank City Sustainable Cities Initiative, we could at least have a look at it. But I assume they are different.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realise you could hear me. Yes, Eunice, it is Shelley from Bristol, but also with my Cities Commission for Climate Investment hat. So I was just clarifying, when the workshop agenda was sent out this week, it was the first time I'd sort of seen it being called the Sustainable Cities Initiative. And I know there's also one for the World Bank. I'll send you a link to it. And I was just checking, but it seems like they are different things. But obviously, the Cities Commission for Climate Investment would be keen to get involved in any further work on the climate finance strand of the multi-level action pavilion and the work in the run-up to COP27, which I messaged you about anyway. So. Yep.
Thanks, Shelley, for clarification. I also have received your message. Of course, the UK report was important because it was also launched at the pavilion, and you may have heard in the G7 agenda we are moving forward. Core cities was also very, very helpful on that. So we would look forward to continuity of this investment panel and the reports, also in connection to the pavilion and the rest of the finance agenda as well. So yes. Let's stay in touch, and thanks for your inputs and following up closely.
Yeah, and it'd be good to loop in with David Jackson as well, so maybe we could do a joint call. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we covered all the questions, correct?
That is correct. So if no more are coming through, I think that we can close this call and thank all of our partners and colleagues for being with us. Go over to cities-and-regions.org and make sure that you are registered for the full series. And also Eunice's updates, which come to you about weekly or sometimes even more frequently as the agenda packs up. So we want everyone to stay involved with us on the line. Another gratitude sent to our co-panelists, Stefania Romano and Ingrid Kutsia. Thank you for your updates and your tireless efforts on behalf of nature. And we hope everyone will have a great rest of their week. So we'll be in touch in email from here. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Yunus. Thanks, everybody.